Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I am Ben Stone, Director of Arts and Culture with Smart Growth America. I'm joined today by Emiko Atherton, Director of the National Complete Streets Coalition. Emiko is on mute. She'll be joining us for the question and answer session at the end. Next slide, please. So today we are here to discuss everything you see on your screen right now. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Smart Growth America and the arts and culture work we've been up to in recent years. We're going to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been tracing in response to the pandemic that is currently happening all across the globe. I'm going to explain, of course, the main purpose of our webinar today, explain our goals for the initiative that we are launching this week. And then our real goal also for today is to help you put together the best possible application you can submit. It's the kind of project, like many of our projects, where we're really interested in making sure that the kinds of submissions you send in are the kinds of things we're looking for so that we can have the best sort of projects to work with and the best partners to work with. Next. So Smart Growth America, a lot of people are familiar, hopefully on this call, with Smart Growth America, but many of you might be familiar with some of our different program areas. We're a little bit of an unusual nonprofit in that we are an amalgamation of a bunch of different organizations, many of which used to be separate from Smart Growth America. And many people come to us and know us through Transportation for America or the state Smart Transportation Initiative or any of these other different organizations. But no matter how you know about us or which organization you've connected with, it's important to know that all these organizations sit under Smart Growth America. Next. And important for today, we are divided into 4 different teams, all listed there. And the work that we're talking about today is run by our Thriving Communities team. And within that team, our Arts and Culture program and the National Complete Streets Coalition, we're collaborating on this work. Next. If you're not familiar with SGA, I encourage you to go to our website and learn all about us. But in a quick nutshell, our vision is that we envision a country where no matter where you live or who you are, you can enjoy living in a place that is healthy, prosperous, and resilient. Next. And so what is smart growth? Again, many of you, I'm sure, are quite familiar in working on these issues on a regular basis, and I won't read what's on the screen here. And again, you can find a lot of this information on our website, but smart growth is not just the land use of a community or the physical design of the community, but it's about the people that are in a place. It's about the processes that are used to make a place happen, about the investments that go into a place, about who benefits from the places we're designing. And it's really a way of building communities and working with communities that is environmentally sensitive and sustainable, as well as being equitable to the people who are in the places where we work all across the country. Next. And our arts and culture team works in a number of ways. We've been around now for a little over 4+ years, and we primarily work in one of 3 different ways, and these often overlap. We, as we're doing today, fund projects to create exemplary case studies to build the case that artists and designers and other creatives have a role to play in the smart growth movement, especially as it relates to transportation. We, in the photo there, is from a project we've been supporting for a number of years in Nashville, Tennessee. We track projects, create placemaking projects, and involved artists, especially in transportation sector, so that we can explain the benefit to the public. I'll explain one of those projects in just a moment. And then we train practitioners to connect the arts world with the transportation world and the planning world and the engineering world as well. And you'll see a somewhat nostalgic image there from back in the before times when we could all get together from our Intersections conference, also in Nashville from a few years ago. Next. And so these projects in recent years have taken a few different forms. Most recently, we ran with these wonderful people you all see on the screen here. The Arts, Culture, and Transportation Fellowship worked with fellows from 4 different cities, 11 fellows in 4 cities, to bring together people working on arts and culture with those responsible for transportation in their communities. One of the more recent projects we completed at this intersection. Next. We also recently started 2 of the first artist in residence programs at state agencies. This one shown here at Washington State Department of Transportation. We've also been supporting a similar residency at Minnesota DOT as well. Next. And our work often takes the form of technical assistance, where in this case, we have been running a series of trainings in communities. Shown here is Mariposa, California, We've been working again with the arts sector in those communities and the transportation sector to help translate across these two communities, help people work more seamlessly with one another, and have people realize that their goals are often the same, that the arts sector has a lot of skills to bring to transportation projects, while the transportation sector has a lot that it can learn, of course, from artists and designers. Next. And then the image I showed before, and I encourage everyone who's on this webinar or listening to this recording, who's considering applying to our initiative to look into this report. Our arts, culture, and transportation field scan was completed with Art Place America. And it's really a way of explaining how and why artists are involved in transportation projects all around the country, the role they play. We divided it up into 7 different typologies, explaining exactly what kind of role they play, what the benefits are. You can find that at that rather long link up there, but if you go to either the Transportation for America website, Smart Growth America website, or Art Place America website, it's pretty easy to find on any of those sites. Next. And this animation that's hopefully showing up on your screen now is just one of the many, 7 different kinds of solutions we found artists are contributing to for transportation challenges. It's a great place to start if you're looking to learn more about what it is we're talking about with artists involved in transportation projects. We spelled it out and actually illustrated it with these animated GIFs on our site as well. Next. And then also another way of explaining what it is we care about. Again, important thing to keep in mind as you're working on your applications. We really believe that artists are problem solvers, creative thinkers, community leaders, and quality team members. You can join teams working on all kinds of transportation projects all over the country. And we have lots of evidence through many of the projects I just mentioned as to how that can actually happen. Sometimes it means we're talking about artists who are painting murals, but it often just means we're talking about people who are the real culture bearers of their communities, the storytellers, the people who understand how things work in the places where projects are happening. They have the connections that are often needed to get opinions into projects and get people to show up for community engagement sessions. And we're less concerned about a specific medium, whether it's paint or music or performance, and more concerned with the approach of the artists and the way they work on teams on transportation projects. And of course, we care about making transportation systems safer for most vulnerable users, and we really care about trying to fix the inequities that exist in so many of our transportation networks all around the country. Next. So of course, here today, we are talking about the Arts and Transportation Rapid Response, this new initiative we have just launched this week. Next. And we're fortunate enough to have 2 great funders, as you see here, the Kresge Foundation and National Endowment for the Arts, who to be perfectly honest, had funded us to do a couple of other different projects before the pandemic became a clear obstacle to the work we were doing and the work that all of us were doing, and have been extremely flexible in allowing us to use that funding and the projects we had set up to run this spring in February and March to be shifted over to be more responsive to the kinds of issues that we're all facing now. We're, of course, in a very different place than we were back in February and early March, so we've been lucky to have funders who are allowing us to be flexible and be more responsive and hopefully provide something that's useful to all of you listening today. Next. And that different world that we're all living in often takes a form of looking like this. Signage and encouragement to, of course, stay 6 feet away from everybody. The world has changed rather quickly. It's still changing rather quickly. We spent a lot of time in early spring, especially March and April, talking to a lot of folks and transportation agencies around the country, arts folks, other nonprofit leaders, about what people are facing, what kinds of support they might need, and found a lot of different things happening at a rather rapid pace. Next. And probably one of those examples that has been celebrated quite a bit all around the country are the opening up of streets and elements of streets that were really set aside for vehicular travel, for pedestrians and other kinds of active mobility to move in spaces so they can spread out more easily. When you have a sidewalk that isn't itself even 6 feet wide, it's very hard to walk by someone, of course, when you're supposed to be 6 feet away from them. So this is actually an example from my own neighborhood here in Oakland, California, where I'm based, of the Slow Streets project, which I'm sure many of you have heard about in Oakland. And we found that many of the cities that were responding in this kind of a way were doing so, of course, with the materials they had at hand, with construction equipment and signage that they already had on hand. They were moving at a rather rapid pace. Next. And we found, of course, that transit agencies and bus operators and other transportation operators were also responding, again, rather quickly with the materials they had, with trying to block off the front entrance so that people would board buses from the back entrance and avoid face-to-face close quarters contact with the bus drivers. Here, an example with some caution tape used. So I should be clear that I'm in no way trying to throw shade at transit operators. This is an extremely stressful time for frontline workers, and we certainly appreciate the work they're doing. So we don't by any means seem or want to be seen as trying to say that these are not appropriate responses. They are, of course, rather quick, totally appropriate responses. We do think that there's a role for artists and designers to play in making them even more effective. And we'll be talking about that in, of course, just a minute. Next. And so many of you have probably been to our site and seen our complete streets and COVID-19 map, but if you haven't, I encourage you to visit Smart Growth America's website to see this. This is an attempt, a crowdsourced attempt to track some of those interventions I just mentioned, as well as dozens and dozens of others all around the United States. We have examples from, I believe, as far north now as Alaska and as far south as Lima, Peru, last time I checked. And of course, many from within the United States related to micromobility, related to streets, transit, anything you can think of, all the sorts of different interventions related to dealing with the current pandemic. And if you are listening in and trying to think of how you might involve an artist or how you might respond to the current pandemic, this is a great place to look for many different examples. Next. And all those dots you see there, you can click on those, and again, my hometown example here in Oakland will pop up with the 74 miles of slow streets that are being implemented right now. Next. And there's lots of creative examples out there as well. We have some of these linked on our website on the application page. MACDO has a long list of different kinds of examples of responses to the pandemic, as does Street Plans and a number of others. This is a shot from the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Met Council hired an artist, Whit Siasoko, to design some locally relevant, culturally sensitive signs to, again, encourage people to be happy together, but stay 6 feet apart for their trail system. Next. And then another one that's made the rounds recently on social media, all the way in Singapore, some rather aesthetically pleasing use of tape to show where people should be standing as they're queuing up for, in this case, some businesses, and using benches in one way that's rather different than the way they had been using them before, which is to just use half the bench, not have someone sitting next to you. Next. And then another kind of, I'd say high-end example, not necessarily from the transportation sector, more from the restaurant industry from Amsterdam, an example of a way to really cordon off people so they can dine in privacy with even their waiter responding to them or talking to them through a glass panel to have a safer experience in public space. Next. And then there's some examples of designers showing the kinds of dances we're all, I think, going to be going through if we're not already in spaces to pick up the kinds of essential goods we need to grocery shop. And this is just an example from a studio called Shift in also the Netherlands, showing how a space, sports field, might be sectioned off so that people can move and still stay 6 feet apart from each other while shopping at these different kinds of kiosks which are set up. So lots of creative thinking already being done. A lot more is going to be needed as we start to come out slowly from the kinds of shelter-in-place orders we've all had and try to move around, although many of us have, of course, already been moving around for essential services and essential jobs already. This is just one example of how that might look in the future. Next. So I want to shift over to what we're really trying to accomplish with this project. And there's going to be a lot of text in the next few slides. All this information is on our website, and this recording of this webinar will be posted in about a day as well. But our goals for this initiative are split into short-term goals and long-term goals. And honestly, these kinds of goals are pretty similar to the goals for all the projects that our arts and culture team does. And that is to provide immediate assistance. We know that there's a real need right now to have people move safely throughout space for recreation, to get to their essential jobs, to run the kinds of errands they need to be running. We know there's also a real need in the arts community to employ artists. Few people have been hit harder than the arts community in terms of the economic impact of the pandemic. We have heard over years that one of the most frequent questions we hear from transportation agencies as they think about doing this kind of creative work, working with artists, is really just where do they find artists in their communities. We want to help make some of those bridges and those connections happen. And we want to make sure the pilot projects that are happening now across the cities, and the ones I mentioned earlier, are connected to the communities that they're located in, connected to the needs and wants of those communities. We want to, as with all of our work, drive equitable decision-making and support the needs of the most vulnerable in those communities. And we want to support projects that reflect communities' unique local culture. That might even look like some of these interventions playing out differently in different neighborhoods and certainly differently from city to city across the country. And from a long-term perspective, we see this as hopefully an introduction for many agencies to the arts community, hopefully something that can blossom into a longer-term relationship. There's no reason why this should start and end just during the pandemic. We were advocating for the role of artists in transportation projects before the pandemic. We're advocating for it now. We'll continue advocating for it after the pandemic is behind us. Again, set the stage for future collaborations. We hope that this is the gateway drug to get you into more exciting artistic work. And we also want to make sure that the kinds of pilot projects that are being launched, which are very much in line with the kind of work we've been advocating for, especially the slow streets movement and sharing streets and making more space for pedestrians, don't go away when the pandemic goes away. We understand that perhaps in the case of Oakland, 74 miles might not be appropriate in the future, but we hope this kind of thinking and these kinds of projects can stick around in some form. And we think that making them more pleasing to the communities they're locating in is likely to be a good way of accomplishing that goal. Next. So if you're selected, what will you get? In other words, how does this whole project actually work? So if you apply and you're selected, you're one of the cities that is selected, you as the city representative will receive, or your agency will receive, a stipend in the range of $2,500 to $7,500. We have a range in there because we understand that some of these projects will be of different scales than one another. Some will be rather simple, straightforward, not very time intensive, and others will be much more intensive. So we've left a range there that we'll determine after we've selected the projects. You will be matched by us with an artist. We have a national team that's working with us to help find artists in communities. The artists will then be contracted by us. We're going to streamline that process and do the contracting ourselves. And they will receive between $5,000 and $20,000, which will be split between paying for their time and paying for their materials. And that'll be paid directly by us. Again, we recognize that some of these might be fairly straightforward, simple design projects. Others might be more intensive projects that involve the purchasing of materials and physical interventions, which might be more expensive. So that's why we're leaving a somewhat wide range there. Mention that range also, even though the agencies who are applying are not directly getting that money, hopefully that gives you a sense of the kinds of scale of projects we're thinking about. This is not a program in which we're looking to fund permanent solutions or pouring of concrete or anything like that. That, of course, would blow the budget out of the water. Nor are we hoping to do little tiny things. We're hoping to do something that is kind of in between those two. The artists will receive training. We have a training regimen set up that will work with artists and give them the best of the knowledge that we have and some of our partners have with working with the transportation sector, so they're ready to succeed in these projects. We will hire photographers to document the projects in each city, and we'll provide some management assistance to each city as well. Just to walk through how this actually works, we will, once we select the city, we'll actually set up a call with the local team to talk through what it is you're hoping to accomplish. We're going to write up a fairly short project brief that explains exactly what it is you're looking to do, where you're looking to do it, the timeline, all the sorts of things we need to then hand over to the artist that we will select. The artist can look at that, come up with a work plan, come up with a budget. We'll negotiate with them. And once that's all set, we will match them with the city and have a series of calls to kick off that project. I can talk a little bit about that more later. Next. Rather important information here. This is the criteria that's listed on our website. This is how we're going to decide who it is we are working with. And I want to make sure this is all really clear because we've gotten some submissions that don't quite meet all of these, but really this is meant to be a funding opportunity, an initiative that supports projects that very directly deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. We understand and we certainly know from our conversations and travels that there are transportation challenges in every community in the country. There were before the pandemic, there will be some remaining after the pandemic, but this is not a program meant to deal with those that are unrelated to the pandemic. It's meant to deal specifically with the ones that are connected to the pandemic. So likely new ones or things that have been exacerbated by the pandemic in some cases. We're going to be judging these based on the level of creativity and how you talk about how an artist or designer might support you. So we encourage you to think expansively about that and expansively about the role an artist might play on your teams. We're going to be judging the relevance of the artistic intervention to make sure it's something we think could actually work. We have lots of experience with these kinds of projects, of course. We're also going to be trying to select a diverse range of communities. So if we get 5 submissions all from the same city, it's unlikely we would select all 5 of those, or perhaps even more than one. We're trying to come up with a range of different places, different community sizes, and different kinds of projects as well. And then finally, we're also interested in addressing the inequities in transportation, so working with the most vulnerable people in your community to solve problems. Next. Eligibility. The eligibility requirement that's most important is that this is an opportunity for, as we're calling it, jurisdictions to apply. That could be a transit agency, a Department of Transportation, a Department of Public Works, really an agency, a public agency that has authority over transportation in your community. That should be the lead applicant. This is not a program like many of our other programs in the past, where an arts organization or an artist or a neighborhood association should be applying as a lead applicant. They could certainly be involved in the project, and artists will be involved in all these projects in the end. But really, we're looking to have public agencies apply as the lead on this. I'd say the one exception to that is in the case sometimes with bids or other nonprofits who have been authorized to have authority over changing transportation infrastructure or managing streets. Those would be relevant as well and would be eligible to apply. So you have to have authority to actually do the work that you were saying you would like to do in the application. That's the most important part of that. I think that's spelled out pretty clearly there, but really anyone within the United States, that includes territories and tribal governments as well, is eligible to apply. Next. This is what the application form actually looks like. We tried to streamline this as much as possible. We are not trying to make this difficult for people. We know everyone is stretched pretty thin these days. Things are changing day by day. So that is the entirety of what you need to complete in order to apply for this opportunity. So basic contact information, a couple of forms to fill out about what it is you want to do, one with additional information you're welcome to fill out as well. We've had a number of questions about cities and jurisdictions that are interested in working with a particular artist or have perhaps worked with an artist in the past. If that is the case, you can actually add that in there under number 3 in the field that's there under, is there any other additional information you'd like to include? You can list that person's name or any ideas you have about that, but that is absolutely definitely not required, and we're looking forward to making matches where appropriate. Next. And finally, maybe the most important piece of information to share with all of you today. This is the deadline for applications, Tuesday, May 26th, the end of the day then. So we encourage you to get them in as soon as possible. We're going to start reviewing right away. This is meant to be rolling, but we are going to make our final decisions after that. We hopefully will have funding to do this again in the future, but as of now, this will be wrapping up then. So we encourage you to get your submissions in by the 26th. Next. So this is the opportunity for people to ask questions. I think some people have been submitting questions to us, but if not, we encourage you to use the question function on your screen to send in any questions you might have. I'm going to start just by answering a couple of questions we've received. Even just this morning, we received a number of emails with questions, and a lot of them repeated themselves from a number of different cities. So we'll go over just a couple of those to start. The first one is about reporting requirements. A number of folks have asked, is there a requirement to submit a grant report? What kinds of reporting requirements are jurisdictions signing themselves up for if they're selected? And we want that to also be pretty simple and straightforward. We'll have each jurisdiction sign an MOU with us that, of course, says they will do the work that we are supporting them to do. That is rather important. We generally provide half the funding up front, half at the end. We're asking everyone who is selected to join us for a webinar at the end. We want to make sure that all of you and everyone who follows along with the work we do hears about the kinds of projects that were funded and what was accomplished through this work. We haven't set a date for that yet, but it'll just be an hour-long webinar with each person presenting for a short amount of time. And we're going to have everyone sit with us for an interview after the project, also probably just about an hour or so, just so we can capture those stories and write up a piece about the work. And finally, although we are hiring photographers to document the projects, we would like everyone who's selected to also document this visually. This doesn't have to be professionally or by hiring a photographer yourself, but really just shooting things with your camera phone, so we can get some photos of the work in progress. So hopefully pretty streamlined and not too onerous for anyone. One of the other questions we've received a lot is about selecting artists, and if we have a roster of artists, and if you are an artist, how do you get on our roster? We don't have a roster of artists. We have a lot of artists we've worked with already. We have some national partners who have lots of connections in different places. We have local partners who have connections in those local places where they work. So the response to artists who are interested in applying is that there isn't actually a field or a application portal for artists to apply. If you're an artist in a community, we encourage you to contact your transportation agency and ask them to apply and include your name. You're certainly welcome to email us and tell us you're interested, but that's not exactly the way we will be selecting. We'll be selecting based on the agencies that submit. So I encourage you to get in touch with those agencies and encourage them to submit on their city's behalf. Just looking to see if there are any other questions that have come in. I'm currently not seeing any at the moment.
Ben, can I add, this is Emiko Atherton with the National Complete Streets Coalition. I've seen some questions come through because I have not had to speak. Maybe I can answer some of them. So if you could clarify, there have been a lot of questions on whether agencies can apply can put in multiple applications.
Yeah, good question. The answer is yes, but per my earlier point, it's unlikely we'd select more than one project for a single agency. So probably wise to submit your best one, but there's no penalty for submitting more than one.
Great. And then one of the questions that I saw come up a few times was in terms of the artist match. I think you've been very clear that you know, if an agency wants to work with a specific artist, they should put that in the application. But can you clarify whether the agencies will be paired with a local artist? I think there was questions around where the artist will be traveling to a city, whether it be from that community. If you could provide some clarity on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, great question. Our goal is, as part of our long-term goal in matching artists with the agencies in their own communities, is to find local artists. I think in nearly every case, that'll be what we do. There's probably a few small exceptions where there might be a project that can be done digitally and it makes sense to have someone from somewhere else. But I think definitely our priority is to have local artists participating in these projects, especially with the current inability to travel very easily or safely around the country right now. That's something we'd like to avoid.
Great. I've also seen some questions come in around the timeline, kind of how quickly the funds will be available, expectations from the cities and artists about when we'd actually like to see these projects on the ground.
Yeah, great question. The grant period officially ends in the fall, so we are looking to have these move rather quickly, but they would need to be in the ground and wrapped up by the end of September.
Great. Another question that I've seen come in that actually I'm going to answer just because it falls within a little bit my wheelhouse is, I think there's been, I've seen a lot of questions come in about what actually qualifies as a qualified agency. And the way that I think about this is that someone has the authority to decide whether something happens within the public right of way. So you know, usually that might be building facade to building facade. So within the street space, within a park, at a transit stop, we really want to make sure that the lead applicant, and you can partner with a nonprofit, but that the lead applicant actually has the legal authority to make those changes within that public space. So I might work for, say, a Main Street organization, but I actually need to make sure that the jurisdiction that owns and operates that right of way, who might be a city, it could be a county, it might be, depending on the community, actually the State Department of Transportation, actually has the authority to make those changes or to allow that within the right of way. So I just wanted to clarify that because I've seen that question come up a lot. And so if you are a nonprofit and this is interesting to you, I'd say please reach out to your city to see if they'll actually put in the application and work with you on this. But that, I am not really familiar in any cases with, we're looking for this to happen within the public realm. And so that we are under the assumption that your local, regional, or state government owns, operates, and maintains that public realm. And then let's see. I'm just looking if there's any other questions. So Ben, could you talk about how we'll be selecting the artist, kind of the curatorial process?
Sure. So we are looking to work with artists who have at least some level of experience working with public agencies, ideally even with the transportation sector. So many of the projects we do are about training artists to do that work. The ACT Fellowship I mentioned before is one of those examples, and there's lots of others we've done. This is not meant to be one of those sorts of projects. We'll likely have more projects like that in the future, but this is really meant to be a project that moves quickly and puts the people who know how to do the work together to get the projects done. So that'll be one of our top criteria, is finding people who have already done this sort of work and done this sort of collaboration and are ready to succeed. We have a couple national partners that we're working with who have experience working with the arts community in cities all across the country and all across the world. So we're going to be tapping them for their knowledge of people in different communities to work with. There's a good chance we'll be talking to some local folks as well, local arts councils and other arts nonprofits to get their advice as well.
Great. I see a really interesting question, which is how will we be measuring the impact of the projects on people's perception, change on people's idea about mobility, speeds? Is that something we're thinking about?
Yeah, this is always a great question when it comes to involving artists in these sorts of projects or the creative placemaking field at large. I'd say in this case, we are not necessarily setting up a controlled experiment where we have artists working in some cities and not working in other cities and see how that plays out, though that might be interesting to do. But rather, we're going to be asking the cities we work with what it is that they're hoping to accomplish by working with an artist. Hopefully, they'll tell us that in the application itself, but certainly when we select folks and talk to them. And that'll give us sort of the benchmark of what we're actually looking to accomplish. And frankly, then at the end, we'll just ask people what they actually accomplished and how they got to that point. So if they were looking to change behavior in a certain kind of way, have people use a street differently than they were using it before, perhaps people were not following social distancing guidelines, and having an artist or designer sends the message out differently, we would ask the cities to tell us how that was accomplished or whether or not it was accomplished through the intervention of the artist. So it'll be different on a case-by-case basis. Every project will be a little bit different, and the goals of the projects will be different, but we'll be setting those goals at the beginning of each project and then tracking them by talking to the cities we partner with.
Great. A few more questions. One I'm going to answer, and then Ben, I've got another one for you. One is, what is the stipend for the agencies supposed to be used for? And really, we consider this a grant to the local agency to be able to carry out this work. We know that many city, regional, and state governments right now are greatly impacted by COVID-19, specifically in regards to your revenue. So we want to be able to compensate you and allow, really allow for this to happen by giving a small grant to do that. Ben, we've got some questions about the detail of the proposals. How detailed should the proposals be?
As detailed as one can fit in the very short form we've included. We've intentionally set a limit pretty low on there. So you'll find that if you try to write a very detailed proposal with all the project details clearly spelled out, you will run out of room. And the rationale for that is that we expect to receive quite a few of these. I think that's likely to be the case. We have a lot of people on this webinar, a lot of interest already. And in order to turn this around quickly, we just can't read multi-page applications from everyone. So it's meant to be a starting point. We understand that everyone can't include every detail that's in there, but you'll be judged against other people with the same kinds of restrictions in place. And we will dive into some of the details by scheduling phone calls with finalists.
Great. I've got a question about how we're defining artists. Can you talk about kind of the types of artists that might be paired? Is it just going to be visual or artists, or can cities expect all different types of artists to be paired with them?
Yeah, great question. We are rather expansive in our definition of artist. Generally, anyone who calls themselves an artist qualifies as an artist in our minds. I think it'll be very much, again, on a case-by-case basis. We would not pair a performer with someone who needs a visual element created for them, or a sculptural element. We would want somebody who has that specific skill set. So it'll really be about finding the kind of work that needs to be done and then finding an appropriate artist. There might very well be cases where projects could go in more than one way. And it could be someone who has a performance background, or it could be someone with a graphic design background who could equally approach something. And that'll be a conversation we have with the cities to figure out which way they prefer to go.
Great. Do you expect all of these projects to be, I guess that we've seen questions about whether these projects essentially have to take place in the public realm, or could it be something online?
They could be online. The primary goal of this is to have it impact the transportation infrastructure of communities, whether that's sidewalks or streets or buses, light rail, et cetera. If it's about messaging, and of course a lot of messaging is happening online related to the pandemic and otherwise, that is considered appropriate.
Great. I do think, and I'm sorry, there are a lot of questions that came in, and so I tried to make sure that we picked some generalized questions. So Ben, while you're looking through to see if there's any last questions that you'd like to address, I do want to remind people that we recorded this webinar. That should be available in about 24 hours, I'd say no later than Monday, on our website. All of the application for the agencies is also available on our website. You can also reach out. We have contact information for May Hanslick, the program manager for this. So if you have any individual questions, go ahead and send them to May. But as a reminder, we are taking applications on the rolling basis, although it is a short timeline. We are looking for applications for, again, from agencies that have the legal authority to make changes to their public realm. And you can continue to send questions if you need clarity on that. With that said, if you are a nonprofit or different type of agent, or a different agency within the government, say public health or parks, that wants to partner, you can reach out to us and we can help try to connect you with your city's Department of Transportation, Department of Public Works, and who is that authority. Transit agencies, I'd personally love to see something around, some transit stops, as many of our essential workers are still relying on transit to get around. The timing for this is, we expect to see something by the summer, and that we're really excited to see things and the intent of this is to really help mitigate and respond to some of the transportation challenges during COVID-19. So with that, did you see, Ben, any other questions come in?
I have not. I think we've answered all of them.
Great.
So
if you want to close, Ben?
Sure. Thank you for that great summary, Emiko, and thank you everybody for joining us today and for submitting your questions. I'm sure many of you will have questions that pop up. So I know May has just put her contact information in the chat bar, so hopefully you can all see that now, and if not, you can find it on our website as well. With that, I'll just thank Emiko and May for helping us behind the scenes to run this webinar, and thank all of you for listening in and for sending us your applications. We look forward to seeing them. Have a good day, everyone.